The Northern Storm and the Thunder Fleet Kido Butai set sail. November 1941. In the far northern reaches of the Japanese archipelago, where the gray fog of the Kuril Sea coils like mute spirits drifting over the waves, an enormous secret was slowly waking. The wind from Siberia slashed through the air, cold enough to tear breath apart, whistling through towering antenna masts and seeping into every seam of steel on the giant warships anchored in an endless row. The sky was dull and heavy, the sea black as ink, and snow drifted lightly across silent decks, as if nature itself was holding its breath for a moment history was about to ignite. Amid that condensed stillness lay a colossal strip of steel casting its own shadow, Akagi, flagship of the Kido Butai. The strongest carrier fleet the Empire of Japan had ever assembled, and the most powerful aircraft carrier strike force in the world at that time. Its dark red hull loomed like a beast in hibernation, yet with one knock on its freezing metal you could hear a deep echo, like the heartbeat of a monster stirring awake. On the flight deck, A6M0 fighters rested beneath tarps, snow beating on their metal wings. Nearby, D-3A, Val, dive bombers and B-5N, Kate, torpedo planes stood in immaculate rows like soldiers sleeping beneath a thin white shroud. Every machine had been tended to perfection, engines breathing softly, frames taut like strings waiting to unleash the first note of a symphony of devastation. Everything, air, wind, current, even the sailors' eyes, was stretched tight as a bowstring. No one except a handful of senior commanders knew where they were headed. But everyone understood this much. This was the most critical operation in the history of the Imperial Japanese Navy. The sealed orders were locked away in a small safe aboard the Akagi. They would not be opened until the fleet had left port, beyond any shore that might listen. Now, below decks, inside a cramped room lit dimly yellow, Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, commander of the Kido Butai, sat before the safe. His hands trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from the weight of a nation pressing on his shoulders. He said nothing. Around him, a few staff officers stood stiffly. One wiped sweat from his brow despite the freezing air. Another gripped his notebook so tightly his knuckles turned white. The silence was heavy as lead. Nagumo opened the safe. Inside lay a red-sealed envelope bearing the crest of Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto. Under the yellow lamplight, the wax seal glowed like fresh blood. He tore the seal, a small, dry sound, yet it echoed like the crack of peace breaking apart. From the moment you receive this order, he read, voice low, Kido Butai will secretly set course northeast. Under no circumstances may the operation be detected. Objective: Pearl Harbor. The room froze. No one breathed. A young officer instinctively tightened his grip on the steel table. Another inhaled sharply. They all understood. This was not simply a military operation. This was the greatest gamble in the history of the Japanese Navy. If they succeeded, Japan could seize control of the Pacific. If they failed, the empire might pay with its future. Outside, the wind wailed along the hull, a warning from the ocean. When the order spread through the fleet, there were no cheers, no excitement, only eyes, serious, burning, burdened, young sailors, many barely 19 or 20, lined up to receive instructions, cheeks flushed from cold but eyes bright with determination. They were told, do not ask, do not speak, do not wonder. This is the highest secret of the empire. On Akagi's deck, the wind was strong enough to rip snowflakes from sailors' shoulders. Sasaki, a petty officer with 6 years aboard, tightened his scarf and stared into the vast northern sea. He thought of home in Sendai, of his wife's face, of his daughter's laugh at dusk. But inside him rose a strange feeling, pride, unease, anticipation, and a quiet fear he couldn't name. History is starting, he whispered. Across the deck, a group of Zero pilots stood near their covered aircraft. The youngest, Lieutenant Shindo, only 22, gripped the frozen railing as the wind stung his eyes. He felt the ocean testing him. Are we ready? An older pilot asked. Not just ready, Shindo replied. We were born for this moment. A simple answer, but one filled with the faith of a generation raised on Bushido. Then it came, the long, slicing blast of the departure horn. Tearing through the mist, below deck, the turbines roared to life, shaking the ship with a deep, awakening breath. The Akagi lifted anchor first, cutting through a thin layer of sea ice. One by one, Kaga, Soryu, Hirayu, Shokaku, Zuikaku followed, forming a formation only those who lived with the sea could appreciate. One mistake by meters could be fatal. From above, over 30 ships began moving like a steel dragon crawling across a black ocean. Supply ships, cruisers, destroyers, anti-sub escorts, all slipping into a journey no one was allowed to know existed. No radio. No signals. No traces. The Empire of Japan placed its future in the silence of the sea. Night fell quickly, dragging cold sharp enough to bite skin. Every exterior light on every ship went dark. Only dim red bulbs slipped through the bridge windows so pilots and officers wouldn't be blinded when moving between dark and light. No music, no chatter, only the hush of waves and the deep hum of engines. Akagi led the fleet, its bow cutting the water like a sword. In the command room, Nagumo stared at the map. Shadows clung under his eyes, marks of sleepless nights. On his shoulders rested not only military responsibility but the fate of over 100 million Japanese citizens. A young officer approached. "Admiral, all ships in formation, currents steady, northern winds stable." Nagumo nodded. "Let no one know we exist." "Yes, sir." Nagumo turned to the dark sea. Waves collided in whispers, as though the ocean itself understood the gravity of this mission. On Shokaku's deck, mechanics worked under tiny red lamps, leaning, rising, tapping rubber hammers on airframes, checking screws and cables. A rhythm formed, quiet, relentless. "Where do you think we're going?" one mechanic whispered. "Don't ask," the other said. "Orders are orders." "But 6 carriers, all this secrecy." "We go where the Empire commands." "And I heard," the mechanic lowered his voice, "we're striking a place no one ever dared touch." "Stop it," the other snapped. "You want to get locked up?" They both laughed softly, but without warmth. It was the laughter of men hiding the chill in their chests. Night 2. Winds grew harsh. Fog thickened so much that ships a few hundred meters apart were only red dots in the void. Waves slapped against steel, leaving white foam that vanished instantly. Lieutenant Shindo stood alone at the bow, arms crossed, staring at the horizon, seeing nothing yet feeling everything. They were utterly alone. No allies, no signals, no world, a mission sealed off from existence. "Can't sleep, Shindo?" It was Captain Takahashi, his squadron leader, hard-faced, razor-eyed. "Something feels like it's waiting for us," Shindo said. "Fear?" Takahashi asked. "Not fear, something coming. But I don't know what." "Good," the captain replied. "Men who feel fear think clearly. Men who don't are the ones who die first." By day 3, the fleet slipped deeper into the desolate northern Pacific. Ice drifted like scars of the ocean. Sailors shoveled frost from decks. The wind sliced like blades. But this brutal world granted one advantage. Kido Butai was nearly invisible. No scouts. No merchant ships. No enemies. A sea empty of witnesses. Days passed. Radios picked up nothing but wind and static. Sailors wondered aloud if the outside world still existed. On the 6th sunset, the sea burned red. The ships glowed like embers in the dying light, beautiful, haunting. But beneath the beauty lay a warning. There was no turning back. Nagumo gripped the railing. "We have entered a road with no return." A single radio crackle, a lone scout plane, a merchant vessel crossing paths. Any one of these could ruin everything. That night, the fleet entered level 3 blackout. No lights. Windows sealed. Only hand signals and red lamps. "We're disappearing from the world," a sailor murmured. "No," another whispered. "We're stepping into darkness, so when we appear again, we will be thunder." And Kido Butai pushed east, toward a chapter of history inked in fire. Toward the morning of Pearl Harbor. The North Pacific at the end of November 1941 was no place for the faint-hearted. The seas, where icy northern winds cut across the water like blades of steel, where thick fog could swallow the horizon whole, had now become the silent path that Kido Butai had to traverse. 6 large aircraft carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, Shokaku, and Zuikaku, alongside more than 30 escort ships, formed a colossal battle fleet capable of shaking the Pacific order itself. Yet at this moment, no matter how powerful, they were merely silent shadows drifting across the ink-black water. From the moment they left Hitokapu, Admiral Nagumo's most important order was clear: do not let anyone detect us. No lights. No radio communication. No radar except in extreme emergencies. Only flag signals, dim flashing lights, or internal lines were allowed. At night, the flight decks became vast black expanses. Like land without moonlight. Young sailor Suzuki, only 19, stood watch on Soryu's deck, his hands trembling in thick gloves, whispering to the comrade beside him. In weather like this, if someone falls overboard, no one will find them. His friend responded softly, his voice hardened by the cold. No one's allowed to fall. We still have a mission. Suzuki didn't answer, only stared into the distance. On the horizon, the world was nothing but endless black. The wind whistled through cables and metal plates, creating a chilling sound, both like the ocean's sigh and a vague warning from fate itself. Below Akaji's deck, the massive turbine engines purred, muted to avoid echoing through the night. Veteran engineer Morimoto leaned close to the lightly vibrating machinery, feeling it with his body and ears. Modern instruments alone were not reliable enough during this secretive operation. He spoke to a young apprentice. Do you hear that? Turbine number 3 is slightly off. It's minor, but we must watch it. The young man nodded, sweat forming despite the freezing air. As Morimoto went to adjust it, the apprentice whispered, I just hope everything goes smoothly. Morimoto heard and placed a hand on his shoulder. There is no smoothly at sea. Only live or die, and we are heading toward a place where everything will be decided. In the pilot's quarters on Kaga, dim red lights fell on young, exhausted faces, tense and alert. Many lay with eyes closed, but sleep would not come. Captain Fuchida, who would lead the first strike, sat in a corner, jotting brief notes in his notebook. Distance to Oahu is still great, yet time flows quickly. Weather is poor, strong winds, thick fog, but the fleet's morale is stable. A strange calm. Something tells me I will not die in this battle. As he put down his pen, a young pilot asked, Captain, do you think the Americans suspect anything? Fuchida smiled faintly. They do not think we dare. That is our greatest advantage. But as the question hung in the air, Fuchida's eyes darkened. He knew all too well. These soldiers were barely over 20. Many faces in that room would never return to Japan. On the third day at sea, the wind shifted, layers of fog lifted, revealing a gray sky, but the clearer waters brought anxiety. Greater visibility meant higher risk of detection. Ships adjusted positions, keeping formation looser to reduce observation from afar. On Zuikaku's deck, a group of pilots checked their A6M0 aircraft by hand. Engines could not be started, only mechanical systems and weapons could be inspected manually. One touched his plane's wing as if it were an old friend. Everything all right? Yes, but I wish I could hear the engines now. This silence is unnerving. A faint smile. Silence keeps us alive. When engines roar, the war begins. On Akaji's bridge, Admiral Nagumo stood alone for a long time, staring at the endless sea. Words were unnecessary. Since leaving port, he maintained an unreadable expression, as if bearing an invisible weight even his closest officers could not touch. Chief of Staff Kusaka approached. Admiral, weather for the next 3 days favors us. Thick fog, strong north winds, detection risk is low. Nagumo nodded, showing neither relief nor joy. Silence too long makes men forget their purpose. We are not hunting whales. Kusaka, we are starting a war. The end unknown. Orders are given. There is no turning back. Kusaka replied. Nagumo's gaze deepened like the dark sea. Indeed, no one among us can turn back. On the fourth night, the sea grew rough. Massive ships heaved, waves splashing violently over the decks. Yet the fleet did not slow. Formation must hold. No gaps allowed. On Shokaku, Navigation Officer Yamashita spread a large map, marking positions based on tides, wind, and speed. No GPS, no modern instruments, only compasses, clocks, and experience. A sailor asked, if we get lost in fog, can we find each other? Yamashita looked out the dark window. No, but we will not get lost. This is the strongest fleet Japan has ever assembled. We are here to change history, not get lost. On the fifth morning, a minor incident occurred. An unidentified merchant ship appeared on the fleet's southwestern edge. All ships slightly altered course, slowed to avoid crossing its path. Orders transmitted via micro light signals. A watchman on Kaga held his breath for 40 minutes. Finally, the ship disappeared into the mist. Relief rippled through the decks. But only slightly. Everyone knew, if seen, the entire campaign would collapse. Japan would lose its chance for a preemptive strike. On the 6th day, the fleet entered waters with light snowfall. Snow fell on the flight decks, a rare, eerie sight. Young sailor Takahashi caught flakes on his hand. First time seeing snow on a carrier. Feels like the world reminding us this may be our last peaceful moment. A friend laughed. Don't say that, think positive. Positive? There's something in the air, many of us may not return. Kido Butai continued south, avoiding shipping lanes, American vessels, civilian flights. The fleet almost vanished from the world's maps. In Japan, their names were unspoken. Military reports only referenced meaningless codes. To Americans, the seas were empty. For them, it was a journey with an unknown return. Subsequent nights were silent, meals were quiet, only spoons clinking metal trays, engines humming below, faint rattles as ships heaved. No one spoke, no one wanted to break the tension gripping their hearts. On the 7th day, senior officers gathered under Akaji's deck for the most critical order. Change course east toward Hawaii. Extinguish all identification signals. Prepare mentally for D-Day. After nearly a week crossing desolate seas, the most powerful Japanese carrier fleet in human history reached the decisive point. From here, every path led to the Pacific, and to a battle that would enter world history. They did not know whether the outcome would be victory or tragedy. They only knew the game had begun. As Kido Butai turned east, the fleet's atmosphere shifted completely. No more quiet hallway chatter. No soft laughter. Only absolute focus. Everyone understood. From this moment, every minute could be their last before the attack. On Akaji, under dim yellow lights, pilots gathered in briefing. Fuchida entered, his flight jacket still carrying the cold of the deck. Everyone fell silent, not out of rank, but because they knew the man before them bore a responsibility heavier than any. Brothers, we are about to enter the most important part of our journey. We will strike Pearl Harbor. Primary objective: neutralize the American battleships before they can launch or respond. I will lead the first wave. A young pilot raised his hand. If we're detected before reaching the target? Fuchida answered immediately. That will not happen. The fleet moves in secrecy. Our planes will take off far enough to avoid American radar. Morning clouds will help. Another asked. Captain, what are our chances of survival? The room fell silent. Finally, Fuchida replied. We do not come here to calculate survival. We come for the Empire. But, I will lead the way. I promise. Below in Kaga, mechanics worked tirelessly. Engines of Zeros were stripped down. Every bolt, wire, and fuel line inspected. Hands stained with oil, yet no complaints. Every small error could send a pilot into the sea forever. An older mechanic to his assistant. When those kids fly tomorrow, their lives are in our hands. Do it clean, do it right. The assistant nodded, voice low. My brother is on Soryu, he flies tomorrow too. The mechanic placed a hand on his shoulder. Then we must do our best. Fix it as if it were for family. In Hirayu's pilot lounge, 3 men sipped cold tea for warmth. Do you think we'll win? One asked, staring at the steel wall. We must, otherwise Japan will be crushed by America's industrial war. This is our only chance. I just want to survive and return. I haven't even proposed yet, said the youngest. The others laughed softly, but the laughter could not mask the truth. None were certain to live through the next hours. Final checks were conducted in silence. Armor and gas masks. Parachute straps. Torpedo and dive attack drills. Flight paths memorized. One instructor said, if your engine fails at sea, try to glide until a comrade sees you. If not, cut free before hitting water. Chances are slim if the plane breaks mid-straps. A young pilot whispered. Sounds like instructions for death. War is like that, but remember, we do not go to die. We go to pave the way for Japan. On Akaji's bridge, Nagumo stood long, hands clasped behind him, eyes on the dark sea. Wind slammed his cloak like drumbeats. Kusaka approached. All pilots ready. We can launch within an hour. Good, let them rest. At sunrise, everything changes. Not just for them, for the world. Kusaka hesitated, then Nagumo called. Do you ever wonder if we are opening the door to victory or to destruction? History waits for no one. Those who strike first live. Those who hesitate are crushed. Kusaka replied firmly. Nagumo nodded, eyes heavy. I know, the closer to attack, the more I realize the cost will not be measured in ships or planes, but in the souls of a generation. The final night before launch, silence enveloped the fleet, footsteps echoed lonely on steel corridors, whispered conversations drowned by waves. Fuchida, by a small window, wrote, "Tomorrow, history will turn. If we fail, Japan loses everything. If we succeed, war will ignite more violently than ever. No one knows what awaits us." He closed the notebook. Tomorrow, he would lead over 180 planes into battle. Below deck, mechanics still worked, sipping hot tea, hands trembling from fatigue. Many won't return tomorrow, one whispered. Yes, but they fly for duty. We stay to bring them back, or repair for the next sortie. Everyone has a role. I just want to hear the Zeros roar at dawn. If they roar, we live, another murmured. At pre-dawn, a small signal sounded. The fleet reached the final assembly point. Japanese carriers formed their formation, ready for D-Day. Pilots fastened harnesses, mechanics prepared engines, officers checked wind maps, captains held course. In that moment, between the night sea, the icy north wind, and the hearts beating hard, every person felt it. A new chapter of history was beginning. And it would be written in steel, fire, and blood. The eastern Pacific sky began to lighten. From the horizon, the first rays of the morning of December 7, 1941 crept in like a thin, cold, silent ribbon. No one knew this morning would be remembered for centuries, in history books, documentaries, and tearful memoirs. For the Japanese sailors on deck, it was only the moment awakening them from a long night of anxiety, pushing them closer to war than ever before. On Akagi, an internal signal sounded thrice, cold and metallic. Prepare for launch. The fleet tensed. Mechanics ran to the deck, eyes bright but not with excitement. They knew that in minutes, Zeros, Vals, and Kates would carry pilots' lives into the sky. On Soryu, Suzuki stood watching planes pulled into position, breath white in the cold, hands trembling. The deck officer tapped his shoulder. Stand tall, this is the moment we've trained for all our lives. Suzuki straightened, knowing he was right. No time for fear. Ahead, the first A6M Zeros were at the edge of the deck. Propellers silent, waiting to awaken souls. One command and they would roar like steel beasts. In the pilot coordination room, Fuchida adjusted gear, checked masks and harnesses, then surveyed his young pilots. This is history. Not everyone gets to write their name in the Empire's history. But today, we all do. A tired pilot asked softly. Captain, if we fail? Fuchida met his gaze, voice cold as steel. Failure is not in our plan. Let's go. He donned his flight helmet, stepped out. Silence followed. Akagi's deck lit by dim lamps. Bright lights were forbidden. American radar could detect. Morning mist cloaked the sea, the fleet's last shield. Mechanics climbed planes, checked wing locks, canopies, then stepped back. One engineer laid a hand on a valve frame. Bring him back. The pilot inside heard, smiled unseen. A short horn sounded. Engines whirred. From absolute silence, the deck erupted. Screeching propellers. Engines revving. Metal vibrating violently. The fleet's heart beat for the first time after days of silence. 7 o'clock, morning fully broke. Nagumo watched silently. Officers held their breath. Kusaka checked his watch, nodded. Fuchida signaled. Plane 1, launch. The first Zero surged forward. Akagi increased speed to provide headwind. Propellers stirred mist. Plane lifted, slicing the gray sky. Then the second. Then the third. Soon the deck emptied like a steel waterfall. On Kaga, a young pilot paused fastening harness. Do you ever think, this may be the last time we see the sun? Then look closely. We're writing history, replied his comrade. Planes climbed, engines roared, every human, every face focused on one goal: strike Pearl Harbor. At 150 meters, Fuchida led formation, radioing low-frequency channels Americans couldn't intercept. Maintain formation, no gaps, no excessive speed until past the clouds. Behind him, 180-plus planes spread like a giant steel flock toward destiny. Below, Akagi shook from takeoffs. Mechanics watched as planes dwindled, vanished in clouds. "I don't know who will return," whispered one. "We will, even one, we bring them back," replied another. 8 o'clock. Fuchida saw clouds part, revealing distant light, low mountains, curved coasts. Then the emerald waters of Pearl Harbor. Then the American battleships, motionless. From above, Arizona, Nevada, Oklahoma, West Virginia. Sleeping steel monsters, unaware that minutes later, paradise would turn to hell. Fuchida inhaled deeply. His heart raced, not from fear, but knowing the world would never be the same. He pressed the signal button, speaking slowly, each word etched in history. Tora, Tora, Tora. A secret code. Japan's surprise attack successful, undetected. The sky erupted. Valves dove, engines screeching. Kates skimmed low with torpedoes. Zeros spread, clearing the air of any American planes. Below, Americans ran in shock, eyes wide. Hundreds of Japanese planes descending like steel knives. Alarms blared, anti-aircraft fire erupted, but it was too late. Arizona ignited. Oklahoma capsized. Nevada tried to escape, hit mid-channel. Many sailors had no time for uniforms, running in shorts and undershirts. Fuchida saw flames rise like pillars to the sky. The smell of burning fuel filled the cockpit. He knew this was his doing. Yet deep inside, something twisted, as bombs turned dozens of Americans to fire specks. He thought, war is a monster we can never control. Below deck, Nagumo stood before the map, receiving fragmented reports. No one saw his hand tremble. Capital ships destroyed, airbase attacked, U.S. radar failed to respond, reported an officer, breathless. Kusaka whispered, "Admiral, complete victory." Nagumo didn't reply, only stared at the glass. His reflection, older, weary, heavier than ever. 9:30. Japanese planes began returning. Akagi's deck trembled, not from launch, but the tension of mechanics waiting for pilots' return. 1, 2, 3? Yet never enough, never.